Hello everyone. In this video, we are going to learn about GRC introduction. So, what is GRC? GRC stands for Governance, Risk and Compliance. In other words, following certain predefined rules to avoid the risk. Why GRC? How this GRC has come into SAP? To understand this, we have to get into a little history here. In Texas, USA, there was a company called Enron Corporation, which was established in the year 1985. Enron has around 20,000 employees, claimed a revenue of $100 billion in the year 2000, and the famous magazine Fortune named Enron as the most innovative company for the consecutive 6 long years by the end of 2001. So, altogether, Enron was a successful profit-gaining company. In spite of being a successful company, it has filed for a bankruptcy protection in the year 2001. Bankruptcy is a legal status for a company or for an individual to pay off the outstanding debt. Or, it's an effective way to wipe out all the debt obligations, which was nothing but a creative account fraud done by Enron. Enron could do such fraud because there was no proper auditing system and the account transparency. There were few more companies which have done the similar kind of fraud, which was a huge loss to the government. The US government wanted to stop such fraudulent account activities done by corporations and different companies. So, the government has introduced a new act called Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002. It is mandatory and all the organizations must comply with Sarbanes-Oxley Act or the SOX Act. The objective of SOX law is to maintain financial transparency, disclosure, internal control, documentation, auditing, etc. It is SOX Act in USA, JSOX in Japan, CSOX in Canada, clause number 49 in India. Like that, different countries have their own laws to prevent the fraudulent account activities. Since the SOX law has become mandatory in all the organizations, different software tools have come up in the market which can implement the SOX law effectively. At that time, SAP has approached a third-party auditing tool called Virsa. Later, in the year 2006, SAP has acquired Virsa and it has renamed Virsa as GRC. Over the time, GRC had different upgrades like GRC 5.1, 5.2 and 5.3. All the GRC 5X series is based on the application server Java. Right now, what we are using is GRC 10 series and it is based on the application server ABAP. Now let's see the GRC 10 components. They are access control, process control, risk management, global trade system and Nota Fiscal Electronica. In process control, all the financial activities are performed like certification, control documentation, reporting, etc. Risk management is used by the risk management department in any organization. Risk can be anything like theft, loss or natural calamity, etc. Global trade system allows companies to export and import trade processing in SAP ERP according to the vendor and the country. For example, if any foreign company wants to establish its business in India, according to the global trade system, it has to tie up with any of the Indian companies and give 51% of its share to India. Nota Fiscal Electronica. According to this act, all the companies and vendors have to submit their invoices to the government on the same day of invoice generation, which is an effective way to avoid the financial fraud. It is used in the Brazil country. Now let's come to the first component, that is access control, which is used for the security at the data level. We being security consultants will be working only on access control. Our job is to provide the security at data level. Initially in Virsa, the access control components are compliance calibrator, access enforcer, firefighter, and role expert. Later in GRC 5.3, they are risk analysis and remediation, compliant user provisioning, super user privilege management, and enterprise role management. Now in GRC 10, they are access risk analysis, access request management, emergency access management, and business role management. Now let's start with the first component, that is access risk analysis. ARA has 6 stages in its life cycle. They are risk preparation, rule building and validation, analysis, remediation, mitigation, and continuous compliance. Here, we have to get used to the new terminology like actions. Actions are nothing but T codes. Permissions. Permissions are nothing but authorization objects. What is risk? It is one or more actions or permissions, when available to a single user, creates the potential for fraud or unintentional errors. In the first stage, risk preparation, we identify the risky actions and permissions. For example, creation of a vendor and releasing a payment to the vendor. If these two actions are given to the same user, it would cause a risk. The second stage is rule building and validation. Here, once the risks are identified, we establish the technical rules to monitor the risk, and also we verify and validate the rules. The third stage is analysis. In this stage, we perform risk analysis against the risks defined. Here, we come across the important concept of ARA, that is SOD. SOD stands for segregation of duties. SOD should be implemented in such a way that no single user has access to separate phases of the business transactions. This can be achieved by dividing, distributing, and allocating key tasks among various individuals. By this, SOD conflicts can be avoided and the integration among various modules can be obtained. We assign roles and authorizations to the users depending on the role matrix which we get from the functional team. Role matrix contains role name, validity, T code, authorization objects, etc. What are critical actions? There are certain actions, they are considered to be critical on their own without combining with any other action. Similarly, critical permissions, they are critical on their own. If we have identified any risk in the analysis stage, either it has to be remediated or mitigated. What is remediation? Remediation is a process in which we remove the risk by deleting the access from the user which is causing the risk. For example, creation of a vendor and releasing the payment to the vendor. If user has access to these two actions, it would be a risk. By removing any one of the actions from the user, the risk can be remediated. Now, what is mitigation? Mitigation is a process in which the impact of the risk is lowered down by accepting the risk. At times, depending upon the business needs, we have to give critical authorizations to the users. In such cases, we have to accept the risk. That's when we mitigate the risk. Mitigation monitors and controllers are assigned to each mitigation. Everything performed under mitigation is monitored and documented. In this cycle, we have to find out continuous ways to remediate the risk instead of mitigation. The last stage in ARA is continuous compliance. Once we have remediated or mitigated any risk, it has to be maintained in the business process to keep the system risk-free. To achieve this, we need to stimulate the changes to the roles and users and keep them updated. Continuous compliance is an ongoing process. The second component of access control is access request management. The purpose of ARM is it automates the access provisioning approval process by linking the request with the workflow. Access provisioning activities are user creation, giving additional access to the user, deleting the user, changing password, locking and unlocking the user, etc. In the traditional manner, if user needs any access, then he has to submit request to the concerned manager. The manager has to review the request and make sure that there are no conflicts and risk violations. Then the request would be forwarded to the next level, that is IT security team. They will approve the end user's request in the target system, which is a time-taking process. By using ARM, the entire process can be automated. ARM automatically forwards the access request to the designated managers and approvers within the predefined workflow. Workflow can be customized to reflect the company's policies and to comply with the SOX law. The next component of access control is emergency access management. Emergency access management enables end users to perform emergency activities outside the parameters of their standard role, but within the controlled and auditable environment. For example, in most of the organizations, auditing takes place in a periodic basis, like once in a month, quarterly, or half yearly. During that time, auditors need some additional and critical access, which is not a part of their regular activity. That's when we use EAM to provide additional access to the user for the limited period of time. Every action performed by auditors is monitored and controlled. In EAM, firefighter is the one who seeks the additional access. Firefighter ID is the user ID with the additional or critical access. Firefighter owner is responsible to assign firefighter ID to the firefighter. Firefighter controller monitors the activities performed by the firefighter. The next concept of access control is business role management. In business role management,